ghost town. A night by the campfire. A summer evening embraced the 7 friends with warm air as they sat around a crackling campfire. The flames cast long shadows on their faces, creating bizarre patterns of light and darkness on their skin. They loved nights like this. Someone told funny stories, someone sang songs. But today the atmosphere was different. A light wind stirred the leaves of the trees, and there was a strange tension in the air, as if something was watching them from the forest. "Hey, Logan, you always have something creepy for the evening. It's time for us to tickle our nerves again," Kate grinned, washing down her beer. "Yes, Logan, let's do something new," Nick chimed in, getting comfortable on the log. Logan, a guy with light stubble and dark eyes, leaned forward, his face lit up by the orange light of the campfire. "Okay," he began, "but you have to promise that no one will run to the toilet out of fear." Everyone laughed, but their laughter sounded impatient. "I'll tell you about a forgotten town. They called him Riverton. It was once a beautiful, lively place. But now, he's gone. To be more precise, there is no one who can tell you what happened there. A city that no longer exists." Riverton stood on the riverbank, a picturesque place surrounded by forests and green hills. There was always peace there, as if God himself had kept this city safe. But one night, something happened, something that cannot be explained. It happened at the beginning of the summer, just like it is now. Around midnight, the lights in the Riverton houses suddenly flickered and then went out completely. People thought it was just a power outage, but that was the beginning of the end. Strange noises began to be heard in the streets, whispers, footsteps, and voices. But these were not human voices. People who went out to see what was going on did not return home anymore. Those who stayed in the houses began to hear someone knocking on their windows. They locked the doors, closed the curtains, but it didn't help. By morning, there was no one left in Riverton. They all disappeared, without a trace. No bodies, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Just emptiness, legends and rumors. When they found out about it in neighboring cities, rescue teams went there. But they came back, different. Those who tried to tell something talked about what they saw. Empty houses in which everything was in its place, as if the residents had left literally for a minute. Hot food was still on the stoves, and abandoned bicycles and children's toys lay in the streets. But that wasn't the strangest thing. Some of the rescuers heard voices. They were called by name, the voices of friends, parents, and children. But they weren't the ones they knew. After several such expeditions, the authorities simply closed Riverton. No one goes in there anymore, and if he does, he doesn't come back. The clock that froze. The fire cracked when Logan paused. The friends froze, hardly breathing. "But there is one detail that makes this story even more creepy," he continued. "There is an old town clock on the main square of Riverton. They always showed the time while people lived there. But when everyone disappeared, the hands stopped at exactly 12:15. And here's the interesting thing. Every year, on the same day, on the same night, this clock starts ticking again. It's like something comes to life, but only for a few minutes. Those who risked watching it said that it was at these moments that they heard screams. Quiet, distant, but such that a chill ran down my spine. It's like trapped souls were trying to get out, but they weren't let out. Who or what did it? No one ever found out what really happened in Riverton. Someone says it was the plague. Someone is sure that this is the machinations of a sect that has summoned something from another world. But most people believe in one thing. This city has become a victim of something supernatural. The shadows that appeared that night were alive. They could change shape, enter houses, take people away. These shadows left no traces, only emptiness. Reality is closer than it seems. When Logan stopped talking, his voice still seemed to hang in the air. Nick sat with his knees pressed to his chest. Kate tapped the bottle nervously with her finger. "Are you serious?" Emily whispered. Logan shrugged his shoulders. "It's just a story. Or not." Steve chuckled, but there was a flicker of alarm in his eyes. "And where is this Riverton?" "A few hours from here," Logan replied with a mysterious smile. "Whispers in the night." After Logan's story, a tense silence hung around the campfire. There was almost no wind, but it still seemed like the trees were whispering among themselves. "Okay, guys, relax. It's just a horror story," Steve grinned, trying to sound cheerful. "Are you sure?" asked Kate, her voice trembling. She crouched closer to the fire as if its light could protect her from something hidden in the darkness. "Of course I'm sure. Shadows, disappearing cities, reviving clocks. It's complete nonsense." Steve waved his hand and reached for the bottle, but Logan was still staring at the flames. His face looked tense. "It's not nonsense," he said softly. Everyone looked at him at once. "What do you mean?" asked Nick. "Riverton exists, and I was there," Logan replied. Steve snorted. "Also tell me that the shadows tried to grab you." "I was a kid. I was 10, Logan continued, ignoring the sarcasm. "My father was in the rescue group. He took me with him when they went to check out the city a few years after he disappeared. I still remember this city, these empty streets, quiet houses, and yes, I heard whispers. They were everywhere. Now even Steve was silent, a story that leaves scars." Logan took a deep breath, staring at the crackling flames. Silence hung over the company as he gathered his thoughts. "When my father and I came to Riverton, I thought it was just an abandoned town like any other. But it turned out that he wasn't like that at all. It was as if this city wanted to scare us away. I remember when we entered the first building, the old school. The smell of rot hung in the corridors, but not of dead animals, but of something else. The air was so thick that it seemed as if he was watching us. I remember walking down this long, empty hallway, and there were books on the floor. There are a lot of books scattered as if they were just thrown while running away. And then I heard footsteps. My father said it was just an echo, but they didn't sound like ours. They were light, fast, as if someone small was following us. We entered the classroom. Everything was in its place. Desks, chairs, a chalkboard with an equation written on it. But someone wrote on the board, "Why are you here?" It wasn't written in chalk lines. It looked like a board. She started crying. The letters were stretched out as if they were flowing down. Logan paused, and a tense silence hung around the campfire. Voices from the void. After school, we went to the residential part of the city. My father said that you need to check at home to understand what happened to people. I remember when we went into the first house. It looked perfect, as if its inhabitants had just gone out for a minute. There was a newspaper on the table in the living room. The date was the day before the disappearance of the people. Everything was in its place in the bedroom. The bed was made. The photos were on the bedside table. One of the photos showed a family, a father, a mother, and 2 children. They were all smiling, but their smiles looked strange. The longer I looked at them, the more it seemed that those smiles were not real, as if someone had forced them to smile. Kate nervously wrapped her arms around her knees. And then, when we left the house, I noticed that the street had changed. My father said it was impossible, but the lanterns that used to stand on the side of the road are now gone. And then we heard a voice, a woman's voice. He called us from the house next door. Help. My father told me not to move, but I was a child and I wanted to help. I ran to that house and opened the door. There was a room there, empty, unfurnished. Only the mirror was in the corner. And in that mirror I saw a woman. She looked normal. She was crying and asking me, "Please help me." But when I took a step closer, her face contorted. It became inhuman. Her eyes turned into empty black holes, and she began to scream. I fell backwards, and my father dragged me outside. He said it was a warning, that we shouldn't have gone in there. Night hours. Before leaving, we reached the main square. The clock was there. My father said that they always showed 12:15. As we got closer, I felt something strange. There was a heaviness in the air that made it difficult to breathe. And then the clock started ticking. Slowly, loudly, as if every sound was a blow to the head. My father told me not to look, but I couldn't help myself. When I looked at my watch, it wasn't the dial I saw. I saw the faces, hundreds of faces. They all looked at me, silently, but with their eyes. They begged, and then the clock stopped, and with the silence came something else. I do not know how to describe it. It was like a whisper, but not with words, but with feelings. It wanted us. Take it away. Escape from Riverton. We ran out of the city without looking back. My father said that I should not look back, that if I turned around, I would stay there forever. When we finally got to the car, I heard them. Voices. They were calling me. They were screaming, crying, laughing. They begged to come back. We left, and Dad never talked about Riverton again. But I know that this place is still there. It's waiting. It wants someone to come and stay with it forever. Logan paused. His words hung in the night like smoke from a campfire. None of the friends spoke. They just sat there, feeling their hearts pounding with fear. Kate broke the silence first. "Logan." He didn't answer, just looked into the darkness of the forest, where the branches of the trees were swaying in the weak wind. "Sometimes I think they're still calling me." Silence after the story. Logan leaned back as if his own story had taken all his strength away. His face was illuminated by the faint glow of the dying fire. Nick exhaled slowly. "You're kidding, right? This is all fiction." Logan glanced at him. "If you want, consider it so. Sometimes it's easier to live when you don't believe." Emily nervously clutched her coffee mug. "But if all this is true, what happened to your father?" Logan froze for a moment, then shook his head. "He came back different. After Riverton, he was no longer the man I knew. At night, he would wake up and sit by the window, looking out into the darkness as if someone was calling him. A year later, he disappeared. His truck was found near Riverton, but he was never found." Steve exhaled heavily. "Oh shit, man. Do you seriously think this place is still waiting for someone?" "I don't think so," Logan replied quietly. Kate looked into the darkness of the forest, her face pale. "Do you hear that?" Silence. "It's too weird." Everyone froze. The night suddenly seemed oppressively dark to them, and the forest around them seemed too still. Even the wind stopped blowing. "Let's go to bed," Nick said quickly, getting up. They began to extinguish the fire, but everyone felt that the shadows around them had become thicker. Logan sat a little longer than everyone else, staring into the fire, which was slowly dying. At parting, he whispered, "They are waiting for us. All of them." The next morning, the friends left the clearing. Nick turned around, taking one last look at the place where they had spent the night. He could have sworn that in the distance, between the trees, he saw a figure barely visible in the rays of the rising sun. He quickly turned away and hurried to the others, telling himself that it was just a trick of the light. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the case.